Welcome to TMRN, the Time Monk Radio Network. My forum name is Romans 828 is true, but they call me Romans for short. Today is the 16th of July, 2011, and today it is our distinct pleasure to have as our guest Bill Murphy, Chairman of GATA, the Gold Antitrust Action Committee. As listeners may or may not know, GATA is basically the tip of the spear spearheading the fight to shine the light of day on the truth behind the manipulation of gold and silver prices by the international banking cartel. Bill, welcome to the WebBot Forum Roundtable.
Great to be here, Romans. Thank you for asking me.
Quite all right, our pleasure. The WebBot Forum administrator is Fox, and today he will be doing the recording and the technical support of the show. Several members of the forum were kind enough to join us tonight. They include moderator Brad and forum members Giuseppe, Muskrat, Odinson, RTG, and Vito. For listeners, this interview will assume that you have a fairly good understanding of finance and in particular an interest in precious metals. Bill's work at GATA is widely known around the world. But in this interview, we will ask him to expand on his Gold Antitrust Action Committee endeavors. Incidentally, you will find a wealth of information about Bill, his fellow GATA members, and much excellent precious metals resource data and links at the website of GATA, which is at www.gata.org, as well as Bill's personal website, the Cyberspace Cafe for Gold Investors, LeMetropoleCafe.com. That's LeMetropoleCafe.com. Listeners are encouraged to visit the website and support the organization. Bill Murphy has also been recently interviewed by Eric King of King World News and Sean of SGTReports.com on YouTube. Bill gave testimony at the CFTC hearing in March of last year, which enlightening revelations were brought out regarding the metals manipulation and caused the YouTube video of the hearing to go viral on the internet. As always, this interview will be available on YouTube for free on the WebBot Forum channel and at the webbotforum.com. Bill, are you ready for the interview?
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Romans.
Okay, Brad, we'll have your first question.
Hi, Bill. Thanks for coming on and agreeing to do this interview. I've been following your work for some years now, but for listeners out there who've not heard of GATA or Le Metropole Cafe, can you please give us a brief history of how you got started in all of this and what GATA is actually all about, please?
Sure, I'd be delighted to. In September of 1998, I started my website at the Metropole Cafe, and about 2 weeks after I'd started, Long-Term Capital Management, the big hedge fund, blew up. And when I had been doing some gold work with a fellow who named Frank Veneroso, a longtime friend, and the work we were doing, and he found out or had heard that through good sources that Long-Term Capital Management was short 400 tons of gold. So when they blew up, I said, well, this is unbelievable because they're going to have to cover, and the gold's going to go through the roof because they were having to liquidate all their positions because they were bankrupt. So right after it, I noticed these bullion banks, Morgan, Chase at the time, Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank, were all selling around $300. Every time it would start to take off, they would come in unison and sell, and it happened day after day, and then I heard some other things, and having been a trader myself in the futures market, one time a limit position trader, I realized that the market they were capping us, being stuffed, and it was being done in an organized fashion. I mean, it wasn't just it was always the same people. And from what I heard, I realized that the market was being manipulated by these big banks. So right. I started writing a Scandal Gold and stuff like this and complaining, and one of my new subscribers was a fellow named Chris Powell, who's the editor of a daily newspaper in Manchester, Connecticut. And he said, look, I'm tired of you complaining about it. If you're right, this is a violation of antitrust laws. I have some experience with that in the newspaper business. If you put up $500, I'll put up $500, and maybe we can do something about it. And that's how GATA was formed in January of 1999. Somehow, some miracle, I was on CNBC 2 weeks later, and that was the last time I've ever been seriously interviewed by the U.S. media, once they heard what I had to say. That was in 1999. That's how bad this is. And that's the story. That's how we started.
Thanks, Bill. So it obviously goes to the highest levels of government, this, do you think? Is it a coordinated?
Well, when we first started, we thought it was just the bullion banks. And then when the Bank of England did their ridiculous gold sale of May in 1999, of which Deutsche Bank, I wrote in my commentary the day before through sources, said the gold market's not going up any higher. And the next day they made the announcement, gold dropped $20, which was a lot back then, and it was dead in the water for a year to 2 years. And then we heard some other things, and we realized that you're right. It's the Federal Reserve Bank, the Treasury, Exchange Stabilization Fund, and some other central banks were all involved in this manipulation of the gold price. And it all started with Robert Rubin, as Secretary of Treasury under Clinton, and we can go into that later if you'd like to.
That's fascinating. Thanks very much, Bill. I'll hand you over now to Muskrat.
Hi, very good to be talking with you. What are the most effective and least effective actions GATA has done?
Well, it's another good question. We've been to Washington many times, met with the Speaker of the House. I met with President Bush's best friends in Austin, Texas, and faxes to the President and letters back from Lawrence Lindsay, his economic advisor. But in terms of, and I'll get back to this in a second, but we've had 4 international conferences in Durban, South Africa, at the very bottom in May 2001, Dawson City in the Yukon in August of 2005, in Washington 2008 in April, and then we're having one in London, Gold Rush 2011, in which we're just about sold out in August 4th, 5th, and 6th at the Savoy Hotel. And we got incredible speakers coming from all over the place, including Jim Sinclair, who hasn't made a presentation in 8 years. Eric Sprott is our major sponsor, and John Embryo Sprott will be there. Jim Rickards, this is a great story. I can't get into it too much there, but I just mentioned long-term capital management. This guy's really visible on the mainstream media, and he used to be long-term capital management's lawyer. And I have a letter from him in 1999. So if anybody knows more than GATA does about the real gold story and how right we are, it's him. He was on the other side. He knows everything. And he's speaking at our conference. Do you think he'd speak at our conference if we weren't right? So it's exciting as hell, that conference. So we think these conferences have been very effective. We've tried to get to the media, but basically we're blackballed. We went to England 2 years ago, and we met with all the right people, the FT, The Economist, Reuters, Bloomberg. Not one of them mentioned this, and the Bloomberg girl even said, we're not allowed to talk about you. So maybe this time it's going to be different because very few people have our track record from the very bottom. We've been pounding the table. We can get into that. We knew what was going to happen and why. And most of the people in the mainstream gold world and Wall Street are clueless, and most of them have been neutral to bearish all the way up. They just don't know diddly. So being effective, I don't know. We do talks like this, shows like this, and over the internet, we do the best we can with my commentary with Chris Powell. Has a GATA email list that gets his stuff, and we just pound the table wherever we can and highlight stuff that all fits together.
Excellent.
That answers the question.
Yes, definitely. Excellent. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Bill.
Bill, this is Romans again. What elements of GATA's strategy are currently in play?
Well, I didn't get to finish the last question. I was a little remiss there that I met with Ron Paul about 7 or 8 years ago, Congressman Paul, and met with him. Chris Powell and I went down to meet him in May because he was going to start going after the Fed and the Treasury to find out about an audit for gold and so on. And sure enough, right after we asked him to ask the right people about whether U.S. is involved in gold swaps or gold lending, and he did it the next day on TV, and then he did it again at one point, and then just this past week, right in front of Bernanke in a Fed testimony, he said, "Do you believe gold is money?" And Bernanke said, "No." It was just couldn't have had got a better obvious thing to show people how much they're against gold. I mean, gold's been money for 5,000 years, and he says gold's not money. It's just tradition, and they supposedly have 8,133.5 tons of it in our vaults, which they won't ever audit, or because we don't believe it's all there. So in terms of strategy, I mean, I said we've been to Washington. Congressman Paul's in our camp. Unfortunately, he's going to be retiring next year, which is the one person we have is not going to be there anymore. But I think it's just doing all these things, a little bit here, a little bit there, things that have built up the kind of people we have following us, and the fact that we can attract the kind of people we have coming to this conference, I think, just says it all to us. I mean, you've got Hugo Salinas Price, Mr. Silver of Mexico. Peter George is the Mr. Gold of South Africa. Ben Davies of Hindi Capital gets quoted quite a bit. He's out there and a great deal. And Brian Hinchcliffe, the CEO of Kirkland Lake Gold, is going to be speaking. And he was the one who did the gold leasing operations at Goldman Sachs in London. He used to work for Goldman under Robert Rubin. So we know how this whole thing got started right from the person who did it.
Well, thanks. I did see Bernanke answer that question. Boy, he really hesitated before he said no, didn't he?
Well, it's unique. We've been trying to get people to ask specific questions and reporters to ask questions, and nobody will. My colleague, Chris, says the U.S. government would rather let out their nuclear secrets than what the real gold story is in the United States. And no one's done it before. And because that's why, because he doesn't know if they would have just gone a step further, is the United States involved in just put them on spot for the whole world in any gold swap or gold lending operations. Man, you got to think twice about telling the world publicly about something like that if you're lying.